In fall 2015, the Oregon State University Ecampus Research Unit and 3Play Media came together to collaborate on a national research study about student uses and perceptions of closed captions and transcripts. I'm Dr. Katie Linder, Director of Research for Oregon State University Ecampus and Principal Investigator for the study. Through this research, we were interested in learning several things. We wanted to know more about students' awareness of the availability of video closed captions and transcripts. We wanted to know how various student populations use video closed captions and transcripts, and whether they perceive the use of captions and transcripts as helpful. We also wanted to know the various reasons why students use video closed captions and transcripts, and specific ways that they use these tools to support their learning. Once the study was completed, we had results from over 2,000 students across 15 institutions all over the United States. We learned from these students that they are seeing videos regularly in their courses. In fact, 99.7% of them had at least one video in at least one of their courses. We also found that many of those videos are not closed captioned. About 28.8% of our student respondents said all, most, or many of their courses have closed captions. 27% were not sure. It was important to us to know if students knew how to tell if a video had closed captioning as a feature. 56% said yes, but we had another about 15% say no. About 30% said sometimes they know. We also asked how often students use closed captions when they were available, and we had 35% who responded that they often or always use closed captions when they're made available to them. We had about 1,500 student respondents who did not self-identify as having difficulty with hearing, and we learned that over 70% of them are using closed captions at least some of the time. The percentage of respondents who always or often use closed captions when they were available was higher for students with other disabilities, for students with English as a second language, for students registered with an Office of Disability Services, for students with academic accommodations, and for students who have difficulty with hearing. Of the students who used closed captions, 98.6% found them to be helpful. We asked students why they used closed captions, and we found that the top 3 responses were that they help students focus, they help students retain information, and they help students overcome poor audio quality. Our qualitative data also showed that students found closed captions helpful for environmental reasons, such as needing to study in quiet environments, because video or audio quality might be poor or an instructor was difficult to understand. They said that they used closed captions because they were more convenient, for accommodation purposes, and as learning aids. We had a large number of students who commented on specific learning benefits related to closed captions, and we broke those responses down into 4 categories: accuracy, comprehension, retention, and engagement. Students said things like, "If I need to write down notes, I know exactly how to quote a video." For comprehension, they said things like, "It can help me deeply understand the lecture." For retention, they said things like, "By simultaneously reading and listening to the content, I'm able to retain the information better." And for engagement, they mentioned how they help me focus on the video instead of just tuning out the noise. We also asked students whether and how closed captions were a hindrance to them. Almost 90% of respondents said that closed captions are not at all or only slightly a hindrance. Of the 400 qualitative comments analyzed regarding hindrances, a little over 40% said that closed captions could be distracting or required too much of their cognitive load. About 35% said that closed captions included incorrect information, such as typos, or were incorrectly synced with the video, and that created a hindrance. And a little over 30% said that closed captions sometimes blocked important information on the screen. We also asked similar questions for transcripts. When students were asked how many videos in their courses had transcripts as an option, 43% noted that none were available. Only about 11% of respondents said that all, most, or many of their course videos came with transcripts. 63% of student respondents said that they never or seldom use transcripts, while 19% said that they always or often use them. The percentage of students who use transcripts always or often was higher for students with other disabilities than a hearing impairment, students who always or often have trouble maintaining focus, students who have English as a second language, and adult learners. It was also higher for students with learning disabilities, students registered with an Office of Disability Services, students who have a difficulty with visual representations, students who are receiving academic accommodation, and students who have difficulty with hearing. For transcript use, we saw similar themes to our findings on closed caption use. When we asked students why they use transcripts, the top 3 categories were that they use them as study guides, that transcripts help them to retain information, and that transcripts help them to find what they were looking for. When asked about whether and how transcripts were a hindrance, the top 3 categories of comments from student respondents were that the transcripts were distracting from the video or visual cues or required too much attention or cognitive load, that the transcripts included incorrect information, such as typos, were not well written, or were not formatted well, and that sometimes transcripts were too long, or too much to read, or required too much time. One important takeaway from our study is that students find closed captions and transcripts beneficial to their learning in a range of ways. A second important takeaway is that the most common hindrances for both tools are fixable with increased quality assurance measures. In fall 2016, a report was released to share the results of this study. To learn more and access the report, visit 3playmedia.com/student-research-study. Thanks so much for your interest in this research.